Let me hit you with a number that's about to mess with your head. The median bank account balance in America is just $8,000. Not $80,000, not even $8,000. That means if you have more than 8 grand sitting in your checking or savings account right now, you are statistically wealthier than half the country. Let that sink in for a second. Because here's the weird part. We're told the economy's doing great. The stock market just hit fresh all-time highs. Unemployment is low. Inflation is cooling. Wages are supposedly up. And yet, if you're watching this video, there's a good chance you still feel broke, stressed, behind, like one bad month away from everything falling apart. And if that's you, you're not crazy, you're not bad with money, and you're definitely not alone. My name is Evan, and today we're going to talk about how much money Americans actually have in 2026. Not the headlines, not the averages, but the real numbers most people never hear. And what I found paints a very different picture of American wealth than the one you see on the news. Because while the headlines are celebrating economic growth, the numbers underneath tell a much darker story. So today, we're going to talk about what's really going on inside the average American's bank account in 2026. And more importantly, where you actually stand. Let's start with a stat that should honestly make your stomach drop. 67% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. Let that hit you. That's 2/3 of the country. And before you picture only minimum wage workers scraping by, stop right there. This includes people making $80K, $100K, even $150K a year. We're talking engineers, managers, lawyers, dual-income households, people who on paper are doing well. But here's how it actually plays out. They get paid. The money immediately disappears into rent or mortgage, car payments, insurance, groceries that somehow cost double what they did 4 years ago. And by the time the next paycheck rolls around, they're back at zero. Not because they're irresponsible, but because the system leaves no room to breathe. This isn't a poverty problem anymore. This is a middle-class trap. And it gets worse. Almost 1 in 4 Americans, 24%, has zero emergency savings. Nothing. No rainy day fund, no cushion, no backup plan. If the car breaks down, if someone gets sick, if the water heater explodes, they're immediately in crisis mode. Not because they're reckless, but because after paying for the basics, there's nothing left to save. Now let's talk about inflation, because this is where people get gaslit the most. You've probably heard this already. Inflation is coming down. Technically, yeah, that's true. But here's what they don't tell you. The damage is already done. Prices today are roughly 25% higher than they were in 2020. That's a 25% markup on groceries, rent, insurance, utilities, childcare, everything. Meanwhile, wages didn't jump 25%. Most people got maybe a 5 to 10% raise if they were lucky. That gap between what things cost and what people earn, it's no longer a gap, it's a canyon, and no one's building a bridge. That's why the vibe feels off, because it is. In fact, 32% of Americans say they expect their finances to get worse in 2026. That's the highest level of pessimism since 2018. Let that sink in. Despite all the strong economy headlines, 1/3 of the country feels like they're about to get crushed. And honestly, they're not wrong. Here's what's really happening. America now runs on 2 different economies at the same time. If you own assets, stocks, real estate, a big 401k, you probably had a great year. Your net worth went up, your statements look nice, you feel secure. But if you live off wages, if you trade hours for a paycheck, if you're trying to stretch income instead of investing surplus, you're likely falling further behind. This is the split-screen economy. Turn on CNBC and everything looks fine. Talk to real people and they'll tell you, I make decent money and I still feel broke. Both things can be true at the same time, and they are. Now let's talk about retirement, because this part is brutal. Americans were asked how much net worth they'd need to feel wealthy in 2026. The answer was $2.5 million. Not never work again money, just I can finally relax money. To retire comfortably, people say they need $1.26 million. Now here's the gut punch. The median retirement savings for Americans aged 55 to 64? About $87,500. Let me say that again. People within a decade of retirement typically have less than 90 grand saved. Pull 4% from that, and you're looking at $3,500 a year, or about $290 a month. Add Social Security, an average check is about $1,900 per month, and you're living on roughly $2,200 a month. That's not retirement, that's survival. Savings are only half the picture. Debt is the other half, and it's dragging everyone down. Gen Z is starting adult life with student loans and car payments. Millennials are carrying an average of $132,000 in debt. Gen X, they're the real pressure point, averaging around $158,000. Mortgages, college tuition for kids, helping aging parents, they're squeezed from both ends. And then there's credit card debt, the most dangerous kind. Nearly half of Americans carry a balance month to month, at 20 to 25% interest. That's not debt, that's a tax for being broke. Carry a $7,000 balance at 22% interest, making minimum payments? You'll be paying that off for almost 8 years, and you'll pay nearly double what you borrowed. That's not an accident. That's the business model. The truth nobody wants to say out loud? Wages haven't kept up for decades, but the cost of living exploded. Housing, healthcare, education, childcare, the stuff you can't cut. So even if you're making more money than your parents did back then, you're poorer in real terms. That's why hearing the economy is strong feels insulting, because the economy might be fine, but you are not. So where does that leave you? It means this: you're not behind because you failed. You're behind because the system changed. If you have anything saved, you're ahead of millions. If you're paying down debt, you're moving forward. If you're building even a small gap between income and expenses, that's power. That gap, that's your margin. That's your way out. It won't be fast. It won't be easy. But staying stuck forever? That's not an option. The numbers don't lie, but they also don't define you.